Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is for Mercury in Aquarius. And Mercury is the way that we communicate. It's the way that we express our ideas. It's the kind of ideas we have in the first place. And it's also how we absorb ideas from others or from, particular material. And so it could describe our listening skills and how we process what we take in. And Aquarius is a fixed air sign, and it's the last air sign, so it has its own, cumulative wisdom of all the element of air, I would say. And Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. Now, it's also ruled by Saturn, but when I look at information typically about Aquarius, they are focusing on the Uranus connection. And Uranus is an interesting planetary influence because it's the higher octave of Mercury. So it has a connection to Mercury. When it's a higher octave, it means that it's operating at, I would call it almost like a metaphysical level where it's not the mundane expression. So let's look at what Mercury represents, receiving news. If we're talking about a sign like Gemini or a sign like Virgo, reading a book, reading a newspaper, hearing news on the radio, that could be a function of Mercury. But with Uranus, it could be having a flash of insight, coming up with an invention, but it's coming from the ether. It's not coming from the mundane, grounded 3D material world, okay? So ideas are coming from beyond the physical level, in other words, and even, receiving communications from there as well. So Uranus is associated with intuitive abilities, and these people are ahead of their time. So it's no surprise that they tend to love science fiction because of that, as well as the occult, as well as those metaphysical topics, astrology, the tarot, and other kind of alternative ideas that are ahead of their time. And this can lead the person with Mercury in Aquarius to being seen as something of a quirky individual, because there is, because your belief system differs so greatly from the average person, whether it's because you are advanced or whether it's because you love the unusual. And so if your sun is in Capricorn, people may scratch their heads and say, this person is always acting so conservative, but when they open their mouth, something comes out which is very different. And indeed, as I was doing these readings for Mercury in the different signs, I realized how important Mercury is. I kind of put off doing these readings because I didn't think it would be that interesting or that important. And really, how we think and how we communicate is extremely important in terms of the choices that we make in life and the impression that we make on other people too. Don't forget about that. And so it can give kind of like this mixed message or send this mixed message to people if their sun is in Capricorn and yet they have Mercury in Aquarius. I think I know somebody like this, and he is a real character. And if you talk to him on a certain day, he will be like the typical Capricorn, he does tend to be quite conservative about many things. He's definitely a character, though. And he was the first person who handed me an astrology book about over 30 years ago and said, could you do my chart? And this is before home computers were a big thing. This was in the 80s. And, in a weird way, I attribute him to me getting started on astrology, because I don't think I really had any astrology books before he gave it to me. I might have started getting into it, but for some reason, and I certainly didn't know anything about constructing charts. So this person intuitively knew that about me and wanted me to do that for him. And I did it by hand. And, it was a very interesting thing. So it's somebody who is futuristic. And when I was trying to compile characteristics, I didn't see anything about an inventive mind. And I think that was a great oversight, because I do see Aquarius as an inventor. The sun sign, Mercury, where the person, even if they have a mundane job like stocking groceries, maybe in their mind thinking of incredible things. There's an affinity for technology with the sign of Aquarius and the planet Uranus. So people like this will tend to get into electronics before others. And if you're old enough, you may have had computers before the average person had them in their not that late in the 80s, where people were already starting to get home computers, and the kind of printout paper that they would have with the perforated sides. That was in the way early days. But there were people that were into that stuff way before other people got into it. And these are the types of people that are attracted to the latest technology. But it's not just a frivolous thing. There is, with Mercury and Aquarius, there may be a strong desire to communicate through these means. Now, what's interesting about that is that the person's language can mirror futuristic themes. For instance, and I was surprised when I read this, when I was looking this up, I would have never attributed this to Mercury and Aquarius. They were saying that these types of people can invent new language. And I guess now the reason for that is the fact that that Uranus is a higher octave of Mercury, so language is definitely connected to this particular sign. I was not aware of that. And an example of this would be, I remember seeing a PBS show quite a long time ago, and it was about language and talking about, or maybe it was about slang, but they were showing clips, like film clips, of people using words like cool and groovy back in the 40s, or even in some cases the 30s, these slang words that were used during the hippie era, and even to this day we're saying cool. We're not saying groovy, but we're saying cool. So that kind of thing, and they said it was the jazz influence, I guess. And and that makes sense now when I think of groovy, getting into the groove, the music. So that's one of the aspects of Mercury and Aquarius, is this ability to create language that people end up using in the future. And in terms of the way that language is expressed, I think that that's also interesting, that they say here that some people with Mercury in Aquarius can have robotic speech. And I'm paraphrasing it because I think in the information I read, they said something like computer, talking like a computer. I can't remember. I put robotic speech. But if Mercury is afflicted, which means that it forms hard angles to it, such as squares and oppositions, there could be some sort of speech disorders. And they talk about disfluency, which I believe they were talking about stuttering, that's the the medical or professional terminology, disfluency, the tics, verbal tics. So the person would not have like smooth speech, that they would have a lot of stuttered speech. I mean, stuttering itself, we know what that is, but there are other things that are kind of related to it. And I would even suggest other types of speech patterns, such as atonal, where maybe they inflect the wrong words. You know what? This is very interesting because I haven't looked this up. I probably should. You betcha, doggone it. I found out that Sarah Palin, former vice presidential candidate in the United States, has Mercury in Aquarius at 1 degree of Aquarius. I knew her sun sign was in Aquarius. So, by the way, the sun can never, or Mercury can never be far from the sun. So, if your Mercury sign is Aquarius, your sun sign can either be Aquarius as well, it can be Capricorn, or it can be Pisces. And, talking about these, I don't want to be insulting in saying bizarre patterns, but unusual patterns of, tone, whatever you want to call it, tonality or whatever, where people inflect the wrong words. They go up when normally we go down. And Sarah Palin is a perfect example of that, of somebody who is, who has unusual speech patterns that people really sat up and took notice of, because, and even like were parroting, because it was so different, like Tina Fey doing that, and doing a pretty good job too. But in any case, that is one of the quirky aspects that can be what really is noticeable about Mercury in Aquarius. And I was even thinking along the lines of these tics, maybe Tourette's syndrome, where people shout out things very randomly, I guess without meaning to, or without wanting to, almost as if they are possessed and somebody is speaking for them. And I could totally see that, because Uranus is all about unpredictability. It's like a loose cannon type of an energy where it's chaotic, And this is really how the person may converse with others, is that there could be a tendency of like jumping from topic to topic. Actually, when I went to look up this material to refresh my memory on this, I was actually quite surprised, because I would assume that based on Aquarius being a fixed sign, that this would give more stability to the mind and not more of this kind of hyperactive tendencies. But I think what it is, it's not so much the same as Gemini, Mercury in Gemini, for instance, where the love of novelty and versatility, being a mutable sign, causes the person to just go from one thing to the next. I think with Uranus, it's more of, again, being that higher octave of Mercury, so that means that there's that mercurial nature to begin with. But because Uranus is there's an intuitive part of it, and it's kind of in touch with the cosmos, they may sense that they should be focusing on something else. And it comes across as erratic, because we're used to that kind of reptilian brain that just sticks to something and is very kind of rooted in place. And actually, a Mercury in Uranus person is highly intelligent, being an air sign first and foremost, but they just find it hard, I think, to get a receptive audience. That's my feeling, because a lot of people can't vibe with that. They're just not there. They're not capable of stretching their mind to those places that Aquarius wants to go. And again, I said they're ahead of their time, so they have a tendency to speak over people's heads because people are in the here and now. And this can be very good for a career in computer science, for instance. I would say even just anything that has to do with innovation, because they have that ability to see beyond what is and you know, the mind of the inventor. These are people who are very progressive, okay? And we don't need to look at being progressive as something that is connected to a political party, because in fact, going back to Sarah Palin, she is known as a conservative. And this is exactly what Aquarius is all about, is being a contrarian. So if they live in an environment where everybody is, you know, extremely liberal, they may be that quirky conservative, but they're, even if they are conservative, and I'm speaking, you know, sometimes when I talk about these things, I might be talking about the sun sign more than the Mercury sign. But if they have a Mercury in Aquarius, there's going to be a liberality within that, because Aquarius is a sign of brotherhood, is a sign of humankind. It's a sign of the collective. So there's not that selfish mentality with Aquarius that is only concerned with their own well-being and things like that. There's always a concern for humanity as a whole. And therefore, they can work with others very well and enjoy it. However, and they like sharing ideas. However, other people may not appreciate their ideas because they may seem kind of weird. They may seem kind of out there because these people are thinking ahead. They're not just kind of mired in the present moment. Some of the things that Mercury in Aquarius has to watch out for is being an automatic contrarian. Uranus is a nonconformist energy, so it naturally rejects what is in the, what would you call that, the common opinion, commonly held opinion, or something like that. They want to be individualistic. That's one of the quirks about Aquarius. They want to be individualistic, but they also want to be they also believe in the collective. So it's kind of like, you know, contradictory just on that point alone. This type of person tends to have stubborn beliefs. And this is because Aquarius is a fixed sign. However, they are capable of abruptly changing their mind, and all of those beliefs go out the window. And so they can just change on a dime. Now, it won't be the same as Gemini, which is so changeable from day to day. They probably will be entrenched in one viewpoint and then just suddenly change. So there is, in a sense, you could say there's more stability with the opinion than perhaps a Mercury and Gemini individual, but it still can be kind of off-putting to others when somebody has convincingly laid out a certain point of view and then change so much. They're also dogmatic, and this is, you know, going along with that. Being dogmatic, meaning that they kind of can be closed-minded and just believe their own way of being, which is kind of, again, very contradictory to what they are supposed to represent. So, for instance, if somebody belongs to a particular religion, and like if they say, this is the only way to find salvation or heaven or whatever you want to call it, that's a form of dogmatism, because you're not allowing other points of view, other religions or beliefs to also have the same types of benefits to go to heaven or whatever you want to call it. So that kind of thing can be very, that can work against them if they have these stubborn beliefs. And the other thing which I think is very, to watch out for is this tendency to be a know-it-all. It is very true that Mercury in Aquarius will tend to produce somebody who has a high level of intelligence. And the type of intelligence that often is respected is this type of intelligence, which tends towards the technological and the scientific. Even though there are different types of intellectual prowess, it's not just in technical areas, but those tend to be very valuable for our society. And you can get jobs that pay very well if you possess these kinds of skills. However, if you're dismissive of other people's beliefs and you act, there could be a kind of a subtle form of arrogance that is coming from feeling like you have all the answers and everybody else is an intellectual peon, maybe. And usually Aquarius is pretty good about about being humble in the sense that they don't like a pecking order in life. They don't like that some people, they like an egalitarian system where everyone is equal in their own way and that they have their own worth. However, again, the reality of the situation may not match the idealism that they hold about this type of society. And I think that's what I will leave you with. I think that Mercury in Aquarius really are the dreamers, are some of the big dreamers, the utopian society types of people that they really think, wow, we could have this perfect society where everybody is equal, even inspiring people to go into politics for this very reason. And yet, there's that, we have that ideal, but then what is the reality that, it has to match up with? That's the problem, is that these people have their mind in the clouds, and sometimes they can come across as, mad scientists, genius, mad geniuses. And sometimes they can come across as kooks, as cranks, as people with crazy ideas. But there's a saying, isn't there, about something, I can't remember the exact quote, but something like a crazy idea is an idea whose time has yet to come. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And a lot of people that were dismissed as nuts ended up being right. Even if it is 50 years down the line, 100 years down the line, there are some sketches for contraptions such as airplanes and things that people probably laughed at when they saw, because they were thinking, how are we going to fly in the air? That's absurd. I can't remember. That was an artist, wasn't it? Michelangelo? Was he the one that had the kind of airplane? I don't know. See, that's my thing. It's like I collect a lot of information, but I sometimes can't pinpoint who said what. and when they said it. So Mercury in Aquarius functions erratically, but when it's on the mark, it's an intuitive hit that just comes like a lightning bolt, and it is an ingenious idea. And that's what makes Mercury in Aquarius so special, because it can benefit humanity. Okay, that's what I have for you. And if you would like a personal reading, an astrological reading, the link to my site is below. I wish you all the best. Thank you for listening. Bye.